If you have a why, you can bear almost any how. So if you have that end result in mind, you can really put up with a whole lot. But I wouldn't have a job or feel hopeful as a psychologist if I didn't think that some of the stuff could be trained and taught as well. I think there's certainly hope, and everyone learns all the time. There's always opportunity to learn new things and learn from other people and other experiences.
Hello and welcome back to HERology, the Mount Sinai Health System's newest video podcast. I am your co-host, Dr. Anna Barbieri, and today we're talking about resilience, specifically the resilience of women and girls throughout the lifespan. To tackle such a huge topic, I'm joined by our regular co-hosts, Dr. Joanne Stone and Dr. Lala. And for some clinical expertise on the role of resilience in our lives, we're joined by Dr. Jonathan DePierro, a clinical psychologist here at the Mount Sinai Hospital. Today's topic is something I've been looking forward to for actually quite so long, and this is a topic that we talk about a lot off the air together. So welcome to all of our hosts. You are such experts in this realm, and I'm really interested in this topic myself too. So the topic today is the woman's resilient mind and resilience in general. We have Dr. Jonathan DePierro with us today, who's a total world expert on this topic. So maybe we'll start with you. Tell us even what resilience means, because I do think it probably means different things to different people.
Yes, it means lots of different things to different people. Even researchers can't really agree on what it means. There's a lot of debate. One definition that we like to use is one's ability to adapt, recover, and grow from challenges, big and small.
So not just getting through them.
Not just getting through them.
Pushing through.
Or pushing through. Sometimes we know that the challenges that people face really have an impact and really can be upsetting or distressing. What we know from the literature, though, is there can be a lot of potential and opportunity in that distress. There's concepts such as post-traumatic growth, and what we understand from that is that the distress that people feel going through trauma can actually fuel new possibilities in their life. So growth can also be a very important part of how we think about resilience, and growth in spite of or through distress.
I think that's a great definition, and I really resonated with what you said before. Different people look at resilience differently. And then Dr. Lala and Dr. Stone, what do you think, especially in your practices as women's health practitioners, what do you think you see as resilience in women in particular?
Ooh. Do you want me to go first?
Sure.
Okay. As a heart failure, heart transplant cardiologist, I am so, and you know this so well, I'm so humbled by really witnessing the resilience of the human spirit day in and day out. These are people who are, quite frankly, on the brink of life and death. They're waiting for weeks, months on end for a life-saving organ. And what is it that differentiates one person from being able to do so with a smile on their face, and another one from really just needing a ton of help? And I think this is why I sought John out, to learn from him many years ago. But to me, it's always been about that resilience. And I'd love to talk a little bit more about how we think the woman's mind is more or differently resilient than a man's mind. No comparison intended there. But I think we see it every day, and it's something I'm very curious about. It's something I seek to cultivate in myself and my children. And I think it's a matter of exploring on a personal level. But I agree with you, it's not rigidity, it's not force, it's flexibility and acceptance of what is.
Yeah.
No, that's a great answer. I mean, I think I see it as a maternal fetal medicine specialist. I think I see it in patients who've had really high-risk pregnancies. So one example, and we've talked about it in some other podcasts, is this rainbow clinic that we have for patients who have suffered a loss in a prior pregnancy and then are pregnant again. So they really have to, really master that strength. They have to somehow dig deep. Dealing with the anxiety of a current pregnancy, but really getting through that and looking at what that outcome is, and they grow from that. And then we see after that, they're there for peer support. They help others going through the same issue. So you talked about growth and how people change, and I see it in that setting.
So altruism is a big part of that. So they've gone through this challenge, and then they use the lessons they've learned to help other people or other women going through the same thing.
That's a great point.
I think that's a great point. What I see often in practice, also as a women's health specialist and being in this field, so many women think that resilience is just doing more. It's doing ever more, sacrificing yourself, being able to hold more in your lap. And that's what that means. And especially in certain points in life where so many things tend to happen at once. And I love this reframe, Jonathan, that you proposed, that it's not really going to the end point of to find out where you break, but it's actually being able to get through something and grow out of that. So thank you for all the work you do in this field. Can I ask you, before we get really started with this conversation, how did you get into it?
So I got into resilience by training as a psychologist, and one of my first training experiences was actually here at Mount Sinai with World Trade Center first responders. So here at our hospital, we have a huge program that's federally funded where we provide medical care and mental health care to World Trade Center first responders, NYPD personnel, EMS, volunteers, tens of thousands. And we followed them over now almost 25 years, which I can't believe. And we've learned a whole lot about risk and resilience through speaking with them, through doing research studies, and that really inspired me. Because you can have a cohort of folks who go through the same exact experience or very similar experiences and have very different mental health outcomes. And one of the things that really stood out to me at that time, from hearing from the folks that I was taking care of, was social support and how important it was to have that social support before, during, and after that really challenging time in our nation's history, and how protective it was. If you didn't have a lot of people in your life, you didn't have a firehouse or NYPD station or a union that you can lean on, or buddies or family members that were supportive, you really didn't do well.
Yeah. And I think we're learning more about just the importance of community and social support,
and
even connection.
And how that affects aging and sort of your ability to retain, your cognitive abilities. So important to be surrounded by other people and other activities.
What you said about how one differentiator was this presence of a social connection and social support. Do you see other variables that contribute to someone's degree of resilience and ability to grow? And how does it show up? Is it our childhood environment, and it all goes back to that when we're all 8-year-old children on the inside? Is it, is there a gender difference, for example, since we're talking about women's health? Is it exposure to certain traumatic events, sort of the dose makes the response there? How do you all think about these questions?
My goodness, this could be a whole course.
That's right. Yeah, let's do it.
Let me see if I could summarize in 5 minutes or less. So there are a lot of other factors that we look at in resilience, social support being one. And it's not just who you have in your life, it's how helpful those people are or you perceive them to be. It's also giving support to other people. So I mentioned altruism earlier. There's a big mental health benefit, a wellness benefit to being there for somebody else. It's not just the support you get, it's the support you give too. So that's really, really important. Dr. Lala mentioned cognitive flexibility, so thinking flexibly about the challenges that you face, thinking about them as opportunities, thinking about them not just in a negative way, but thinking about different ways that you can problem solve effectively. Physical exercise is a big part of resilience. We might talk about that later today. Having a sense of meaning and purpose. We were talking a little bit earlier about Viktor Frankl and Man's Search for Meaning, but having a what for, having an end goal. Frankl says if you have a why, you can bear almost any how. So if you have that end result in mind, you can really put up with a whole lot if you have that goal. A lot of pain and discomfort, for example, in fertility procedures, it is not a pleasant process for women to go through, but they have that goal in mind and it keeps them going. Or even childbirth, right? Like deeply painful and prolonged, but they know at the end that, generally speaking, they're going to have a healthy child at the end of it. And that helps get a lot of women through it. So having that meaning and purpose is also really essential. And there are a number of other factors that we can get into. When we know there's a genetic component to this, there's early experiences that can be helpful in terms of having good role models that you've learned from over the years, whether it be a parent or a teacher or basketball coach or piano coach. Any of those folks can be good role models. And there's a genetic component, too, in terms of epigenetic factors or stress vulnerability or disposition and temperament. But I wouldn't have a job or feel hopeful as a psychologist if I didn't think that some of this stuff could be trained and taught as well. Some of this stuff, these factors can be taught in traditional psychotherapies like CBT, but also they're in apps and other resources are out there. People can train themselves to reframe challenges. Certainly, there's lots of exercise routines people pick up over the years, breathing techniques that help people. So I think there's certainly hope, and everyone learns all the time. There's always opportunity to learn new things and learn from other people and other experiences.
I love the line that you said. It's about if you have the why, you can get through the how.
Yes.
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah.
That's a great line.
Yeah. So something you said really struck me too. So you're saying, I'm just going to rephrase it for us here and for people out there, that some people are just simply born more resilient, but there is hope for all of us because we can all do things that can make all of us more resilient. And that's what we definitely want to get into,
Yes.
Here. I also love what you said about kind of being a support to others. I'll tell just a quick story. I'm fortunate to have some patients that I've known for many, many years. And a couple of years ago, I was going through a really challenging time in my life, and a patient of mine knew it. And we shared a little bit of information, and she gave me a song that she had listened to every day during a challenging period of her life. So I did that. The song was by Sia.
Unstoppable.
And by Sia, I couldn't remember that. And I have passed that on to other people too.
Yeah.
And it's really, and the song is not even, you barely feel unstoppable in those moments, right? But there is something about this sort of shared story and shared advice that really works. Great. How do you think, since, we have already gone back to genetics and pregnancy and childhood, for women especially, how does resilience and challenges show up at different stages of life? We all, I think, see it in our medical practices. What do you see as a psychologist in this realm? And maybe we can sort of go around and see how we all see the same thing through different lenses.
Yeah, also a really big question. Certainly there are big things that come up. Certainly as woman is going into the teen years and early 20s, there may be body image concerns, and social media maybe doesn't help there with those issues. And then, obviously, as someone who's maybe choosing to start a family, there's child bearing stress that might come with infertility or difficult pregnancies or family planning. And then balancing, for those that choose to, balancing a career and raising children or a child is incredibly stressful, and there are a lot of single moms out there that I tip my hat to. And certainly in the perimenopause period later in life, there's increased risk of depression and anxiety. Women also are at greater risk of developing PTSD, depression, and anxiety over their lifetimes. The rates are sometimes double what the rates are for men. And some of that is biological factors in terms of hormones at different points of life and fear reactivity and reactions to stress. But some of it is related to different stressors that they actually experience, different life events, caretaker stress, different kinds of traumatic events, including assaults that they might be experiencing. So there's really a lot of different things that women experience over the course of their lifetime that can test their resilience and build their resilience, but also confer some risk.
So can I ask you, sorry to interrupt, but we hear so much about the impact of social media on adolescents and, young people or early 20s. What advice do you give, to parents or to kids who are undergoing that? Because I remember, my daughter when she was younger and always seeing everything that was going on. If she wasn't invited to a party or this or that, and how it made her feel. So what do you?
We
what do you
can't
tell
take
people?
their phones away.
Yeah.
Just cannot. Yeah.
Although if you're in Australia, I think.
I don't know. Try it with a 17-year-old.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the thing that comes to mind, and I struggle with this myself, my iPhone reminds me how much time I spend on it, is moderation in all things. I think it's a St. Augustine quote. I had Jesuit education, so these quotes come to mind. Some of these platforms can be helpful. People have meaningful connections through social media. I've met a lot of colleagues and really strong friends. That's how we met, connecting on social media. But there can also be a lot of superficial relationships or relationships you feel you have with someone and then you're rejected because they don't feel the same way about you. There's not that reciprocity, or people might become overly attached to different celebrities and what they're doing and what the products they're using and what they're doing in their lives. That negative comparison process, and our brains are built for negative comparison, not usually positive comparison. So I think it would be important, and I know time passes very quickly and it's one's day, but for parents to understand and have conversations with their children about the messages that they might be getting from social media, and what are the kinds of things that they're seeing, what do they think about what they're seeing, the curiosity about their experience, rather than saying, don't look at your phone, don't do it, don't go on Twitter. What kinds of things are coming up in your feed? What do you think about that?
I think that's such a good point, and I assume it also should be developmentally appropriate. An 18-year-old can respond differently than a 12-year-old, or those boundaries may be a little bit stricter. It's a very different world compared to just 10 or 20 years ago, I think.
Coming back to that original point, because I'm really curious about that, the differences in resilience between men and women. To me, I almost feel like women carry emotional labor, right? You see these memes on social media where you're thinking about, okay, if you have children, the kids need to be here. I need to do this. I need to get the groceries. I'm going to make bed. I'm going to make this tonight. I have to get this in for work. I have to and there's all these different things. Whereas my observation, at least, and this is also, I think, touted, is that men are able to compartmentalize a little bit, perhaps easier.
Fewer compartments.
No bias, of course. No bias.
Into fewer compartments. I love that.
To what extent do you feel like that impacts resilience, either in a positive or a potentially negative way?
Right. So I think that's being a mom these days is an exercise in cognitive flexibility.
Right.
You build up your working memory, I guess, keeping all these things in mind, and you are a really good problem solver, and you're juggling a lot. Maybe you ought not to be, but you do. And maybe, I imagine there are some women out there that feel that they can't they can't even imagine asking their husbands to help out, or they don't see their husbands as helpful, or that they would just bumble it anyway, so why even ask? And maybe that's not true. Maybe there's conversations that could be had about, retooling, expectations and obligations and helping out. But I would also say that there's, I think also one of the strengths that we see, and I could speak for, I run a psychotherapy service, and 70% of the patients are women. And it is not we treat healthcare workers here at Mount Sinai. It's not representative of the workforce demographics. It's a 50-50 split in the workforce, but it's 70-30 in terms of who come to psychotherapy. And that's actually a general finding. It's not just us. It's for decades.
And do you think it represents the fact that women experience more stress, or is it women's greater ability to ask for help?
It's both.
Or is it women waiting till they're at a breaking point?
Well, I hope not, but sometimes it is. Yeah. But it's I think greater stress. They might experience symptoms more, or even express symptoms more readily than men. There is also some general findings that men have difficulty expressing their Some men have difficulty expressing and naming their emotions. They feel like they need to be tough and deal with it themselves. And maybe women are more, in some instances, more readily able to say that they need help or to support other women and build those communities around themselves.
Is that across all age groups? Do you find that the predominance of more females than males in psychotherapy?
Yeah, it's pretty much a general finding. I think in younger children, one of the general things that we see in children, and again, I don't treat children that often, is that in a classroom setting, there's what are called externalizing and internalizing disorders in psychiatry. You've probably heard this distinction. Externalizing disorders are sort of anger, overt anger, aggression, things like ADHD, alcohol misuse, things that you could see, they're overt things.
Yeah.
Internalizing disorders are internalized symptoms like depression, rumination, and anxiety. And when kids are young in a classroom, it's the loud kid with ADHD who can't sit still that gets a lot of attention, and that's generally boys. And the quiet girl sitting in the corner weeping into her homework is not getting attention because she's not making overt,
Sure.
disturbance.
Yeah.
Sure. How do we think about, women experience certain very unique transitions, and I'm curious if you see any of this, and certainly I think that's something we come across in our clinical work with women. There are certain major passages in a woman's life that happen to coincide with major hormonal changes. Adolescence, right? Such a physical, emotional, and identity shift. Pregnancy, getting pregnant, being pregnant, becoming a parent. And I would even say becoming a parent without being pregnant, certainly through surrogacy, adoption, all of that. It's also a major shift in role and identity there. And then you have, a few years go by, and then you have perimenopause and menopause, and that's a triple whammy of, life changes, identity shifts, physical changes, psychological changes, all of that. Do you see a heightened need for resilience during those times of transition? And what is the current kind of, because we can wax poetically about the role of hormones in the brain and all of that. It's hard to draw the line where physiology ends and psychology and mind begin. But is there a current explanation for this increased need of resilience during those times?
Well, I guess it would depend on how you want to explain or what level of explanation. There are certainly a lot of different factors. As you said, there's hormonal changes that occur at different phases of life. There's also different life circumstances that overlap with that. So if you think about someone maybe going through perimenopause, maybe they're 40, maybe they're 50, they've got maybe middle schoolers or high school students or college students, they've got children potentially. And they've got older parents.
On social media
that are on social media all the time. And they've got older parents. And so they have caretaking responsibilities in maybe two different directions. Yeah. So they're pulled those two ways and other ways at the same time while going through hormonal changes, while having a changing relationship to their body and maybe their sexuality. Maybe their relationship is changing to their partner if they have a partner. So all of that is happening at the same time. And that's a lot. And I think what we've seen, over the years, and thankfully there's a changing understanding of this, is that there really needs to be specific targeted efforts to support women at those vulnerable transition points in their lives. Women's mental health is actually a new concept. It's embarrassing, actually, that it's a relatively new, not surprising, but
it's so wild because those are such unique circumstances, and to not have a unique approach for unique circumstances, it's
I think it was only was it the 70s or 80s that women were required to be recruited in clinical trials.
Yeah.
Yeah, I feel
maybe
like
even
mirrors,
later.
It mirrors so much of what we see. It used to be women's health was pregnancy, and now it's this, major epiphany that there's actually a lifespan and a health span to look at across a woman's lifetime.
Lots of different things happen.
Lots of different things, yeah.
Dr. Stone, speaking of pregnancy, so do you see resilience as a specific theme? And we talked a little bit about getting pregnant, but in pregnancy and then the postpartum period?
Yeah, for sure, I think that there's different aspects of resilience. So some people love being pregnant and it's a little bit easier. We know the effects of estrogen on the brain, cortisol levels, progesterone, on the amygdala and some other things that might help support more resilience and more flexibility. On the other hand, people express such concerns, or they have body concerns, they don't like the way they look, they don't like the way they feel, they're worried about becoming a new mom, being a good mom, they worry about in the postpartum period there's so many things that happen, breastfeeding, things like that. So yeah, I think it's certainly happens throughout the course of getting pregnant, pregnancy, and also the postpartum period. Are they being a good mom? People, they don't come. These babies don't come with a with a handbook. And
I'll tell you, when my first daughter was born, my butt was kicked by the 7-pound being.
Oh my God!
I did not feel resilient then.
No, I went
Definitely
back to work
not.
after 4 weeks. I was like,
So did I.
Yeah.
To make myself feel better.
Yeah.
It was, it's a profound change that I think we underappreciate, even in people that have the support and are high functioning, like those identity plus with an overlay of hormonal changes, with an overlay of maybe multiple roles that are happening at the same time, that was rough.
I do think, I don't know what your thoughts are, and all of your thoughts are, but I do think that there's been such a shift towards a longer maternity and now paternity leave.
Mm-hmm.
So routinely people are taking 16 weeks off. In the U.S., forget it. In the other countries, it's a year, right? But in the U.S. and paternity leave too. So that support that you mentioned, do you find that that's something that's truly impactful in terms of helping them with that kind of resilience and adaptation to their new role?
Yes, I think these benefits and these leaves have been tremendous opportunities for folks to go through this adjustment, to feel their way through the messiness of it, to make plans for what childcare is going to look like afterwards. They don't need to worry about going back to work the next day. They have time to bond with their child and to get used to this new role of parent, and to adjust and to cope and to figure out what their new normal looks like.
It's so funny that you asked that, though, right? Because I think there's a part of us, and I'm being vulnerable here, that's like, but are they going to get that resilience if they take that much time and they have a partner that's home with them? I think we're just trained to sort of think that way. So is it by affording more time, space, resources, help, does that build resilience, or does that potentially deprive you of the challenge? The Rumi quote.
Muscle.
Yeah. Are you missing out on building resilience muscle? Exactly. The only way through pain, or the only way. What is Rumi's quote? The
only way past is through.
Past is through. Exactly.
Well, again, I wouldn't have a job as a psychologist if the answer to everyone's problems is figure it out yourself.
Right.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of situations that people face where they need a helping hand. They need time, and they need space, and they need opportunity. And after a while, yes, they're going to need to cope on their own, but that support is really valuable. That initial, hey, it's okay for this to be messy, and you have the time and the space for it to be messy and for you to figure it out. Rather than, not only is it messy, but you also have to get back to work in the next 2 days.
Suck it up.
Or you're going to lose your job and have no income with this new baby.
Yeah.
So what it sounds like to me, and just to review, we need a little bit of awareness first, right? Awareness that it is an uncertain time. We don't know how we're going to function or feel in this new role, and maybe a little bit of compassion to ourselves over that. And we need time to adjust. Things don't happen overnight. And I think even those two would be super helpful. Plus, we do need certain structural policy changes with maternity leave, with how we look at that really essential, complicated, and vulnerable time. If we fast forward, let's say 10, 20 years, and Dr. Lala, you see this a lot in your practice, especially with all the midlife ladies that we refer to you when different cardiovascular issues arise, that's also a time of, I'm going to say, resilience need and vulnerability. How do you see that in your cardiology practice?
I love what you just touched on, and you said before as well, which is it requires the awareness. And another way of looking at it is curiosity. Not just like, I'm failing, I'm not able to do this, it's too much for me, but why is this difficult right now? What would make it better, right? And is this meaningful to me right now? Why is it difficult? I think offering space between the situation and your perception, awareness is so critical. I think that's what we miss out on so frequently. I think any time that I've taken the time to have space between my thoughts, the situation, and me as the witness, there's room for clarity to come in. And I feel like because of perhaps, and again, I'm somewhat speculating, but because of all the hormonal changes, because of all the situational demands that also happen to coincide with the hormonal changes, sometimes I feel like we lose that space. And I think that the more we can invite that for our patients, for our friends, for ourselves, the more there'll be room for clarity, for acceptance, and then playground for resilience to develop.
Yeah.
And when you said that sometimes your patients say, I'm failing at this, or I'm no good as maybe a new mom is saying, I'm a terrible mother, having curiosity there too.
Yeah.
And this is something that, I do all the time. Okay, what makes you say that?
I love that.
What are you comparing yourself to? Are you comparing yourself to somebody's Instagram story that you're seeing where they're happy and smiley and cuddly and the kid's not screaming
Just
at
for
2
the
o'clock in the
camera.
morning,
Yeah.
which is a sort of a fake put on appearance? Like, what is your basis of comparison? I have this conversation with medical trainees all the time. They compare themselves to the attending who's been doing it for 40 years, and they say that they're failing as a doctor. Well, it's an unfair comparison. It's completely imaginary.
We see it all the time, especially women who are experiencing some early perimenopausal changes, and perimenopause is just coming onto the spotlight. I feel like we dealt with menopause for a few years now. It's perimenopause. Before, certain very obvious physiologic changes like a change in the menstrual cycle or the classic menopause symptoms like hot flashes, a lot of women describe this loss of bandwidth to deal with stress, which is really decreased resilience, sometimes to the same kind of stimulus that they may have experienced before. So this is something we hear every day. I wake up stressed about my day at work, and I've been in the same job for 15 years. I wake up stressed about having to drive my child to practice because I have 8 other things to do, but I've multitasked before. And it's very destabilizing to notice that something is off. And in our kind of this culture of perfection and also of everything being so rushed, including the healthcare system, there is no space for what you were talking about, Dr. Lala. There is no space for the in-between. There's no space to pause. There's no space to think. There's no space to really develop awareness. And I think maybe it is our role also as healthcare practitioners to help our patients that way. And I would love to hear from you is, we've got the prescriptions and we've got the surgeries and we've got the therapeutic directions, but is teaching resilience a tool that we can share with patients? And should it be one?
I would say yes, but I'm biased. And one thing that came to mind as you were talking is that it's, I think, important to think about resilience as messiness, not perfection. Embracing the messiness of life, embracing the challenges in life, rather than striving for some, being a perfect parent, doing these 15 things perfectly, embracing there are going to be some challenging days. There are going to be some days where you feel like you're failing. There are going to be some things that are beyond your control that are happening. And it doesn't mean that you're failing. It means life is happening. And life is imperfect.
Right.
So, we've been talking about this awareness, right? Are there certain things that we should know, like good questions that we should be asking our patients to get that sense of, are there issues that they need to address? I mean, you're like the consummate psychologist, and the way that you turn it out. I mean, my dad was a psychoanalyst. My sister's was a psychotherapist. I have another sister that's a psychologist.
I didn't know that about you.
So I come
Okay.
from along, yeah. So
She's like, I see you.
I pretty much today, so.
You must have absorbed it.
yeah,
You're
a little bit. But the way that you turn things around to ask them the question, well, what do you? So what can we do, or what can we tell our patients to do to bring it up or elicit that, the issues from them?
Yeah, one question sometimes I ask folks, you're going through a lot of challenging situations that would be challenging for anyone in your life and anyone we see in this office. How do you cope with it? What do you do? What do you turn to cope with the things that you face? You're going through heart failure, you're going through infertility or loss. What has helped you? What hasn't helped you? Help me to understand that. I want to learn about what your day-to-day life is like, managing this.
It sounds like you're almost putting a mirror in front of them.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah.
I love that.
And forcing them to
get awareness.
to be a witness to their life.
And it's not asking, are you depressed? It's not asking, are you anxious?
Right.
What do you do? What do you turn to in your life? Who do you turn to? Do you turn to faith? I speak about faith and spirituality. I think 80% of the world identifies with an organized religion of some kind, but how much does it come into a medical encounter?
Yeah.
And it's a tremendous source of support for a lot of patients. For some patients, they might feel like they're being punished by their deity or by their God for something they did or didn't do. But for a lot of people in the world, it's a source of tremendous support and comfort, and the community built around it can be tremendously beneficial in challenging times.
I think the hardest thing to deal with is uncertainty.
Yes.
And I think spirituality or spiritual practice offers a ground on which we can begin to embrace uncertainty. And that's why I have, this, we talk about this all the time. I have such a vested interest in us. And this is what's so exciting about what we're doing is this integrative practice or medicine approach is really just about that, is can we address the mind, body, and spirit in tandem? And the fact that we have to call it one type of medicine or another to me is just,
And there's uncertainty intrinsic in mental health and medicine. We don't know all the answers. We have a general idea of how a disease progresses, but we don't know the person.
Right.
And every person, experiences and expresses a disease in different ways, or a condition like depression. We know what the criteria are, but there are 300,000 different ways to meet those criteria, and it looks very different in every person's life. That's what makes my job interesting. I'm not a robot. I like to get to know the person.
I think that's so, so true, how we handle uncertainty. Because it's not just adversity, it's uncertainty of outcome. That's so challenging in these situations. And how we maintain our own role in it and our own agency, that's really resilience. In our practice, on our intake, there's a question of what makes your life meaningful? How do you find meaning in your life? And it's very consistent what people write. And it's always a version of social support, spiritual practice, and purpose. Those things always show up. And then people joke, they listen to their favorite podcast, for example. But it's always something like that, which is really proof of everything that you've said here.
Yeah.
Do you ever get folks that don't put anything down?
Very rarely. Pretty much never. But I wonder if that also has to do with the fact that it's, people are coming for a certain approach, selected population. And I see all women who, as we said before, are probably reaching out a little bit more. Yeah.
I think about my own mother who, comes from such a place of positivity. So when my dad passed away, he was 98. And she was like, we're celebrating his life. She just brought everybody up. And she broke her hip when she was around 98. She was in France, came back, was flown back here, had a whopping infection, was re-opped, grew Pseudomonas, and she was 98 at the time. And she's now 105.
Oh, wow.
And amazing. I mean, she plays bridge 3 times a week.
You just gave me the chills.
Yeah. So, but oof. Is that I don't know. I don't know where.
Wow.
I don't know how you categorize that.
How to live to be 105.
But with that positivity, right? Because she lost a lot of her friends. She's got only one friend who's still alive, you know?
So
I don't know.
What's the key to longevity?
Yeah,
I was just going to say resilience and longevity.
I must be tied.
I think this is where, maybe science and social media conflict. There's a lot of people on social media selling like injections and supplements and all of these things. And as a psychologist, I think about some key factors. There's very good research on optimism, and not like pie in the sky optimism, but like focusing on what's within your control, realistic optimism, and longevity, or the reverse, which is what's called all-cause mortality. And social support, or the reverse, loneliness and mortality. And because there's links to these things to physical outcomes like inflammation, wound healing, the onset of disease, how people do after hospital discharge is related to their social support. When I teach about social support, I always think back to a paper I read where these doctors were trying to predict how patients coped after being in the ICU. And the outcome they looked at is what's called post-ICU syndrome, so getting depression or anxiety or post-traumatic stress after being in the ICU. And it turns out it was nothing about their actual illness that predicted with any reliability getting that psychiatric outcome. It was a yes or no question. Do I have someone to take care of me when I get out of the hospital at home? Was the biggest predictor of whether they got post-ICU syndrome, and that is very likely to be not intervened upon in the hospital setting when they're focusing on trying to get somebody out the door. And we have a lot of room then, and an opportunity as psychologists and as mental health professionals to foster that if it's so driven and impactful on whether somebody actually survives and how they survive.
Are we not asking those questions enough?
Well, we might be asking the questions, but maybe we feel in the healthcare system as it is, and in this country in particular, in the world, not empowered as providers to do something about it. Join a bridge club, join a sewing circle. Like that's what we got.
So I think, there are cultural forces, even working from home, disappearance of, communities surrounding churches, synagogues, places of worship. People kind of very individualizing and focusing on that all the time. So these are massive sort of societal and cultural changes. And I think a lot of people on the inside of the healthcare system feel powerless against them too. But that is work we should do. Community is health. And I think through a different approach against certain structural changes, I think there's some research on group visits, for example, and how they contribute to better outcomes. And I think now we're finally starting to become aware and understand some of this. So how can we build everyone's resilience muscle, from my teenage daughters through your 105-year-old mother? What are some?
And I was the miracle one born when she was 60. No, I'm just kidding. Yeah, great question.
Well, one thing that comes to mind is to slow down a little bit and evaluate your thoughts. What are you thinking about the situations you're going through? What's the narrative you're telling yourself about what you're going through? Who are the people in your life that you can lean on? Who's your network? And who can you support? Who can you check in on every so often?
I love the altruism part.
And Dr. Lala, you know this. Occasionally I'll just go through my phone and randomly text people that I haven't spoken to in a while. And it's actually not weird. There's actual research behind it.
We have the most loving text exchanges. It's just like, good morning. How about we get coffee? I miss you. And it's these tiny little things that make your day brighter.
It's 5 seconds.
Oh, that's great.
So that's very practical.
Yeah.
Text a friend you haven't talked to in a while.
It doesn't take very long.
Yeah.
And it feels good for you, and it feels good for them. There's actual research behind this.
Without being attached to a specific type of response.
Exactly.
I think that's the key.
Yeah, I
right? If
You're
you're
not looking for
texting
without
something.
expectations.
Exactly. Right.
Yes.
I think that's
You don't need to borrow
yes.
$5 or crash on their couch. You're just checking in to see how they're doing.
Yeah.
I think there's some data on just mindfulness via breathing.
Yeah.
Sometimes mindfulness feels too abstract. People are like, what am I going to really do? I'm not a meditator. The simple act of just breathing and focusing on the exhalation more than the inhalation, we know immediately activates your parasympathetic nervous system. It calms the heart rate. it's telling your body you're safe, right? If that's not a good example of how much the mind and body are connected, I don't know what else is.
And having some routines also can be very helpful. One of my routines is I make coffee every morning, and I wake up at like 6 before I leave for work. I sit for 20 minutes and just have coffee. Sometimes I'm checking my emails. Maybe I ought not to be, but I just sit in the quiet of my living room and have a cup of coffee that I made. I'm not like spending 30 minutes on the routine of making the coffee. It makes it itself. But
You don't have a barista.
I'm not like distilling it into pH balanced paper and water. It's just a regular coffee machine. But it's the silence, it's the routine, it's the smell of the coffee, it's the sound of the machine. It is calming for me, and it's reliable, and I can look forward to it every single day.
I would say, I would actually encourage people out there. That is one of the things I talk with patients about. What are some rituals that are soothing for you? Making coffee in the morning. I hear you loud and clear. That's my ritual too. Yeah. It's a ritual that you can fall back on to enter that space. This is what people use prayer for, and meditation and gratitude practices. I think a lot of these mindfulness practices have a real role in medicine, and we've tended to overlook them. Text a friend, make coffee.
Gratitude.
Gratitude.
That's like
Breathe
my
out
favorite.
more than you breathe in.
Breathe out more than you breathe in. And gratitude. I do this with my kids, and initially begrudgingly with my husband, and now he does it. And I think you know this. We do our 3 thank yous at the end of the day, and it could be as simple as I had my coffee this morning.
Yeah.
The sun was out. I enjoyed doing this podcast, but I think it forces you to see. I think we're hardwired to see the negative, the challenges, but we're not so hardwired to appreciate the small wins in the day, and so that helps me a lot.
I have to get you to do this with your students.
I do.
You with your fellows?
I do. I do. We do
great.
rosebud and thorns with all the trainees.
It's amazing.
That's great.
Thank you all for coming. This was such a great conversation. I learned a lot from it.
Me too, and so many good takeaways. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you for having us.
You're the best.
That's it for this episode of HERology. I am your regular co-host, Dr. Anna Barbieri. For more groundbreaking conversations on women's health, subscribe to Mount Sinai Health System's HERology podcast on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. HERology is a production of the Mount Sinai Health System and the Carolyn Rowan Center for Women's Health and Wellness. To learn more about the Rowan Center and our state-of-the-art facilities helping shape the future of women's health, scan the QR code on your screen or click the link in the description below.